Hello everybody, welcome to the Alaska Weather TV show. This is meteorologist Joel Curtis. Starting out with our hazardous weather, we've got a couple of advisories and warnings to talk about. First of all, for Fairbanks, we have a dense fog advisory into this evening. Fairbanks International was a half a mile and 200 overcast as I last looked. Also, Eielson Air Force Base is down. We have a wind advisory in the eastern Alaska range for both Isabel and Windy Passes, a gust of 55 miles per hour, and an update for Windy Pass. There will be some turbulence there for your flying weather. Also, we have elevated surf for the west coast, water levels higher than usual, higher than normal high tide. And that'll be both on Thursday and Friday, as special weather statements coming out for that. And then for Juneau, we have a high wind warning for Skagway into this evening. Also a flood warning for the Taya River and a flood advisory for the Chilkat River. There are no warnings or advisories for Anchorage. So looking at our satellite image there, you can see that old storm that was out in the Gulf of Alaska has come on shore probably about between Yakutat and Icy Bay, and it's now dissipating over the St. Elias Mountains. Also, pretty strong front coming up to the west coast there with the associated low still over in the northern Bering Sea. And then you can also see those clouds north of Shimria there. There's a number of thunderstorms in that section. So again, looking at the today's weather, there's that low now that's dissipating over the mountains in the northeastern Gulf area and still bringing precipitation onshore to southeast Alaska. Also, we have the 973 millibar low over in the northern Bering Sea, and those thunderstorms moving across and all those clouds. And then the front is just moving onshore now on the west coast, causing precipitation and some wind. Then for tonight, we have a new low that forms just northeast of Kodiak Island, about 1,002 millibars. This is going to cause a new round of precipitation for south central and southeastern Alaska. Snow over the mountains, rain over the lowlands, and then also that frontal system has now moved onshore to the western interior. Lots of showers moving across the Bering Sea associated with that 983 millibar low near the Gulf of Anadyr. And then for Thursday's weather, we can see the low is now weakened to 991 millibars in the Gulf of Anadyr. That low that was off of Kodiak has now moved over to about Middleton Island, 1,004 millibars, spreading rain across much of the Gulf area, including all the coast. Snow showers over the interior, and then lots and lots of showers over the Bering Sea. And then for Friday, things start to slacken up a little bit. That low has moved inland and is weakening to 1,002 millibars over the Yukon Territory. A few snow showers over some of the inland areas, but actually pretty much a good break in the weather for South Central and for at least the coastal portions of Southeast. And then we have a new frontal system forming up in the western Bering Sea, and then also a little bit of a trough moving on to the west coast, causing some precipitation and a little bit of wind there, and then a new system also forming southwest of Dutch Harbor. So looking at our low temperatures Thursday morning in the 20s along the north slope, and then a couple of teens as you get into the Brooks Range. As you move further south, again, temperatures in the 20s all across there, but look along the west coast, you'll see the low temperatures into the 30s, and in southwestern Alaska almost down to 40 degrees, 41 for the Pribilos, lots of 40s out over the Aleutians, and then generally in the mid 30s to lower 40s as you get over to south central, and in the mid 40s for southeast Alaska. And then for our high temperatures on Thursday afternoon, you see 20s and 30s along the north slope, a couple of 20s in the Brooks Range. But as you get further south, you can see those mid 30s, starting to see those 40s, south central in the mid 40s, almost up to 50, 51 for Kodiak. And then southwestern Alaska, temperatures in the lower 40s and 40s all the way out the Aleutians, and temperatures almost to 50 and up to 51 in some places for southeast Alaska. Then for Friday afternoon, we've got temperatures in the 20s again, Friday morning, excuse me, teens in the Brooks Range, 20s and 30s for most of the mainland portion of Alaska. Southeast Alaska, low temperatures in the 40s and 40s out the Aleutians. Then for Friday afternoon, you can see temperatures in the 30s along the north slope, mid 30s as you get into the central interior, lower 40s as in southwestern Alaska, mid 40s as you go out the Aleutians and Kodiak Island and south central, and then also up to 51 for Ketchikan. So then looking at our 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, somewhat of a good chance for below normal from the southeastern mainland and over into southeastern Alaska. You've got, but mostly normal temperatures are forecasted for October 25th to October 29th for a vast portion, at least 2/3 of the state, certainly the west and northern interior, as well as going out the Aleutian chain. Then for a 6 to 8 day precipitation outlook, southwest Alaska has the best chance of being above normal, hovering about 70% or so. And then as you can see, it's still a better than even chance that we're going to be above normal for Fairbanks, Northway, and Kotzebue, and also for southeastern Alaska. And then what we'll do is we'll take a look at for our 8 to 14 temperature outlook, October 22nd through November 2nd. And what we can see is we've got some below normal temperatures really forecasted for a vast majority of the state. Only the northeastern sections do we see that normal temperatures for this time of year, but a pretty good chance that it's going to be below normal for the Bethel, Dillingham, Kodiak, Anchorage, Nome, and then on over to Yakutat, and then normal for a good section of southeastern Alaska. And then looking at our 8 to 14 day precipitation outlook, again, normal for a vast swath of the state from the northeast on down to Bethel and Dillingham, also for the Pribilofs and out the Alaska Peninsula Aleutian chain. But you can see that the far eastern border, particularly around Northway, has a better than even chance that it's going to be above normal precipitation, as well as Yakutat, Juneau, Sitka, and Ketchikan. So looking for a little bit wetter conditions over there, at least a better than even chance. So that's it for our weather forecast. Again, just to review, that dense fog advisory still going on for Fairbanks. Also the wind advisory coming up for the eastern Alaska range. Elevated surf for the west coast on Thursday and Friday. And then we got a couple of flood advisories and warnings in southeast Alaska, as well as a high wind warning that's ending for Skagway. So please stay safe out there, pay attention to your local weather, and thanks for listening to our TV show here. We really appreciate it. So best wishes out there.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, and now for the aviation weather forecast. Starting out with our flying weather Thursday morning, extensive IFR along the north slope, also Kotzebue Sound, eastern Brooks Range, and then down to the southwest interior, including the southern part of Norton Sound, across the Alaska Range, and then over the southern Kenai Peninsula, over to Prince William Sound and out into the Gulf. And then for Thursday afternoon, we have extensive IFR along the North Slope, all along the Brooks Range, part of the Seward Peninsula, including Kotzebue Sound, down into the southwest interior, including the Kuskokwim Delta, across Prince William Sound, and into southeast Alaska, including Yakutat Bay. For the flying weather Friday afternoon, extended IFR along the North Slope again, out to Point Hope, across the central interior, eastern Norton Sound, down to Lake Clark, also northern Cook Inlet and the central interior, and much of the Panhandle. For Friday afternoon, things are improving, but still for the North Slope, extensive IFR, also along the interior of the western coast and eastern interior as well. And then we have a new system moving into the Aleutians, of marginal VFR across southeast Alaska and much of the central interior. Anatovik Pass, marginal VFR becoming IFR. Adigan Pass, marginal VFR becoming IFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, both IFR with turbulence. And turbulence for Rainy Pass, IFR becoming marginal VFR. Windy Pass, IFR. Turbulence in the morning for Isabel Pass, marginal VFR. Turbulence in the morning for Mentasta Pass, marginal VFR becoming VFR. And turbulence in the morning for Tahita Pass, IFR. Portage Pass, turbulence in the morning, IFR conditions. Chilkoot and White Pass, marginal VFR becoming IFR and turbulence all day. For our freezing levels on Thursday morning, starting out, we've got a surface of about up near the Bering Strait or so and across most of the central interior and then on over into Canada. The 2,000-foot line, boy, what a difference a day makes. The 2,000 line is now through the Pribilofs, southwestern Alaska, across Cook Inlet, and then over into Canada. And the 4,000-foot line has receded way far south thanks to the cooler air with the jet stream, down almost to Dixon Entrance. And then you have to be, to get to 10,000 feet, you have to fly over Vancouver Island. For our icing on Thursday, looking at an area along the western and central Brooks Range between 2,000 and 4,000 feet, isolated moderate. And then we have that weather system in the Gulf, the remnants of it. We still have some considerable moderate along the northeastern Gulf Coast on into the interior, and then also in the some in the coastal mountains. Otherwise, most of the Panhandle and Prince William Sound covered with isolated moderate. For a jet stream, man, that's a good strong jet, and it's all south of the state. That means some cooler air has moved in. We've got up to 160 knots, about south of Adak or so, and then it comes on over just across the Haida Gwaii at about 130, 140 knots or so. For a 9,000-foot winds, again, parts of that jet have trickled down to about 9,000 feet, looking about 55 to 60 knots in the main band, generally over the Aleutians and then across the southern Gulf. We do have a little bit of 35-knot wind coming up into the area between Cordova and Yakutat. For 3,000-foot winds on Thursday, about 25 knots in eastern Norton Sound and the eastern Seward Peninsula. Otherwise, 35 knots coming out of Kennedy Entrance, and then the remnants of that jet filtering down again to 3,000 feet. We got about 40 to 50 knots or so coming across the Bering Sea and the Gulf. So looking at our turbulence on Thursday, some considerable moderate all along the Aleutians and up into the Alaska Peninsula. Also, we've got a little bit into the central interior, and that's why we included that in the passes. And then isolated moderate all the way over to northern southeast Alaska. So fly safe out there. We've still got some weather going on, even though those main systems have moved through. And be sure to file a flight plan.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away. The computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often at this point, we don't have much to say in that, because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there, to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed, so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Toman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks, Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now for your marine weather. Starting out with a sea ice edge, a little bit of growth along the north slope. Otherwise, conditions staying pretty much the same in our ice analysis for today. Looking at Thursday's marine forecast for southeast Alaska. We've got the onshore flow around 20 knots on the outside waters, seas up to 12 feet, and on the inside, winds range from 10 to 25 knots and seas up to 6 feet. And then for Friday, the westerlies start to kick in, winds ranging 25 to 30 knots, seas up to 15 feet, especially in the southern sections. And then generally a mixed bag of directions on the inside waters, winds 10 to 15 knots and seas up to 7 feet, especially those ocean entrances. So Thursday's marine forecast for south central waters. On the outside, winds ranging 20 to 30 knots, seas up to 12 feet. For Prince William Sound, 25 knots, seas 5 feet. And then lower Cook Inlet, a westerly kicks in, 30 knots, seas 8 feet. And then for Friday, on the outside, 25 to 30 knots, seas up to 12 feet, 15 knots for Prince William Sound. And then Cook Inlet ranging 10 to 30 knots, seas 8 feet down by Kennedy Entrance. For the peninsula and Kodiak Island, westerlies kicking in, 25 to 30 knots, seas up to 13 feet. And then for the Bering side, 25 knots, seas up to 10 feet. And then for Friday, we've got, again, 20 to 25 knots on the Pacific side, seas up to 11 feet. And for the Bering side, 25 knots, seas up to 11 feet. For the Aleutian chain, on the Pacific side, 25 to 30 knots, seas up to 14 feet. And then 30 knots even all across the Aleutians and seas up to 18 feet when you get out to the west. Then for Friday, for the Aleutian chain, we've got southerlies are starting to kick in on the Pacific side, 15 to 25 knots, seas up to 11 feet. And then for the Bering Sea side, winds ranging 15 to 25 knots and seas up to 11 feet. For the West Coast, southwesterlies kicking in, and that's pushing the tides a little bit higher than normal. We're looking at 15 to 25 knots, seas up to 13 feet. And then for Friday, mixed bag of directions, but the southerlies are starting to kick in, about 20 knots, and seas maximum 11 feet on the outside waters. For our Arctic coast, easterlies 25 to 30 knots on Thursday, seas up to 10 feet. And then as we get down toward the Bering Strait, 15 to 25 knots, seas up to 10 feet. And then for Friday's forecast, 25 to 30 knots, easterlies along the north slope, seas up to 10 feet. And then for the down toward the Bering Strait, winds 15 to 20 knots, seas up to 8 feet. So a recap of Thursday's weather, looking at that low near the Gulf of Anadyr, lots of troughs around it, setting up lots of showers over the Bering Sea and snow showers on the inland areas. And then we have a low about Middleton Island, 1,004 millibars, and a cold front moving through the Gulf. And then for Friday's weather, we're looking at a frontal system in the far western Bering Sea, 1,002 millibars out by Shimia. Also a developer well south of Adak, and but that's going to move to the east directly. And then we have the last remnants of our Gulf low are out in the Yukon Territory, about 1,002 millibars. A trough extends down through the northeast Gulf Coast and almost to Kodiak. A little precipitation out ahead of that. And then also we have some precipitation in a high-pressure ridge, about 1,028 millibars, well south of Kodiak. But the circulation around that system does have a lot of moisture in it, and that's taking some rain down to the Dixon entrance area and towards Washington State. So that's a recap of our weather. Please stay safe out there. Lots of weather going on, and we need to pay attention now that fall has fallen and we're getting into the early winter type patterns that we're seeing here. So lots of we had a few warnings. A few of them have been canceled since I did the public desk. And please pay attention to your local weather and stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.